Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Up Your Game Career podcast. Today we have my best student ever of all time, Anshul Soni, on the podcast with us. Now, hey Anshul, so
Hey,
you know how it's all of us want to play the games, all of us want to make the games that we play, but that's hard to do because it's really hard to travel from wherever you are in the world to the US or to Canada and find work working for the big game companies working on AAA titles. But here's one person who has actually done it. So this is Anshul Soni, and I will let him introduce himself to you. Anshul, take it over.
hey guys. I graduated from Backstage Pass School of Gaming back in India, and then I moved to US. I did my grad studies over here, and I worked for game studio called Sanzaru Games, which is an Oculus studio. And since last 2.5 years, I've been working with Electronic Arts as a software engineer. I have had opportunity to work on multiple AAA titles. Uh, some of them include Spyro, Apex, Star Wars. So yeah, that just you
Oh,
know
awesome, that's fantastic. So Anshul is from Indore, and so Indore is a big city in central India, and that's where he's born and brought up. And I'd like to kind of talk to him today about his journey from Indore all the way to Seattle, working for Electronic Arts. So just to give a bit of reference, around 2012, I was and I still am at teaching at Backstage Pass. So I had a class which was, what was it? It was the
game
bachelor's.
design.
What was it called? Bachelor's in BFA or BTech?
No, so that was BTech in game development and computer science.
Yes, so BTech in game development, computer science, and I was teaching game design and game production, and Anshul was part of that class. I think there were 8 or 10 people in that class. It was brilliant time, way back, and Anshul and we actually worked together after that. He helped me test a game, and then Anshul was also instructor with me at Oak Ridge School. He was teaching kids how to use Unity and make games. He's worn the T-shirt, and he's been my student, and he's worked with me, and like we kind of go way back. So yeah, so tell us a little bit about your childhood, Anshul. Tell us about Indore when you were a kid, like what games you like to play, and tell us about that.
Well, I actually grew up playing a lot of games. So my dad's office was at home, so he had a work PC. So at a very early age, I had access to a PC, and they would install games on that PC. And after the office was done, like 8 or 9 p.m., the PC is free. So I would just walk up to the office, be able to play some games, and my cousins had a console, so that's where I had first a console experience. I played Mario, I played Adventure Island. Those are the first games I remember playing. Chips Challenge, that's another game I remember playing. Yeah, on the PC. And then my parents actually never stopped me from playing games, so they got me a PS2 when I wanted one, and they were okay with it as long as I was studying properly. They were like, "Yeah, sure, we'll buy you games." So yeah, that's how I started playing a lot of games, and everyone around me was playing games. Honestly, in my school, people would be playing games, exchanging DVDs of different games. I think I fell in love with Ghost Recon, the original series. I fell in love with Splinter Cell and GTA. Obviously, everyone in India has played GTA. So basically, that was some of the earlier games. And yeah, so basically I grew up playing games, and I always wanted to be a software developer. I never knew there is like a a combination of these two. I never knew I could be a game developer. I always enjoyed coding, and at one point when I realized that, oh, there is a field as, like, for games specifically, you can specifically write code for
So how
games.
did you find out about that? Like, there
Basic,
was a point when you were playing games
yeah,
and you were like, you were a gamer, and then, how did you find? And I mean, of course, everyone knows about software development, right? 10 years
true,
ago, everybody wanted. That was the beginning of the software boom in India. Everyone wanted to be like B-tech software developer, and uncle and Sharma uncle would be very impressed. It was a thing to do. So what is it that made you say, you know what, I don't want to be not just a software developer, I want to be a game developer. So what was that like?
So honestly, first of all, I was good with writing code in like around my eighth standard, but I
Right.
never actually knew that I wanted to be a software developer. I always wanted to be a mechanical engineer,
Okay.
and
That's interesting.
yeah, and during that eighth standard, I had a personal tutor who used to come and teach me for like my school studies and everything, and he was actually a software developer at Oracle at that point.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I used to, like, write up some small code during my free time or whatever, and I would show him like
This is in
before.
class 8. This is in class
Yeah, this
8.
is an eighth. Yeah, so
Dude,
like
that's
I would show
crazy.
him. It wasn't like code. It was like HTML
Just
or
like hello world,
basic Java. Yeah, and basic Java. I just enjoyed doing it, like typing something and making things happen. That just fascinated me. So I used to show him that stuff, and at one point he was like, "Why do you want to be a mechanical engineer? You are good with this. You enjoy doing this. You should think about it." And when I actually thought about it, after he told me, I thought about it for a while, and I was like, okay, that actually makes sense. I really enjoyed doing this. And then in my ninth or 10th standard, I forgot, but like one of those, I actually joined some classes in summer for C and C++.
Must be
That's where I
they used to be the NIIT.
yeah, and one of those classes. Yes, I joined those in my ninth or tenth. I don't remember exactly which standard, but I did that. And after that, it was just like nothing for 11th and 12th. Everyone is concentrated on board exams for that point. So nothing happened at that point. And between like when I was writing those code, and I always had internet access, so I would write the code. I would also look up online about games and stuff. So I
I
came.
just want to interrupt here, and you said something really crucial in the sense that you had parental support. Like you had a PC
Yeah,
at home. You were allowed to play games. Like nobody said don't play games. You will get spoiled. But I think that was also because you had the self discipline that you used to study, and you just didn't just play video games all day. So you could actually balance playing games with studies.
I did stay up playing all night when my parents didn't know about. My parents don't know about this, but I did. So I finished God of War, the first one, all in the night. Like after midnight, I would put on these headphones and sit really close to the TV because they were wired, right? So it's a 3.5 mm, and I'll connect those to TV, sit really close, and finish that all playing in the night. And they had no idea I did that. Uh,
Yeah,
they
I'm
wouldn't
gonna
have
tag
known
your
about
dad in this video.
it. I mean, at this point, you'll be like, yeah, whatever.
I know. So I mean,
Yeah, I did
a lot of
that.
people, a lot of people have a hard time because their parents don't want them. They're like, "What is this video games? Can you even make a living in video games?" So I think that's a very, I mean, that's you were lucky or whatever you can call it, that you had parental support. You had a dad. I remember you had like really in Backstage Pass. You had really nice. You had the best laptop in the class. I think you had an Alienware, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that must have made a big difference. I mean, you comparing yourself to your peers and other students. Do you think that made a big difference to have support of your
It
family?
definitely did because like once I entered Backstage Pass, I got to know from other people that it wasn't easy for them. They had to convince their parents. They had to bring them to the college and show them what's going on. They had to make them talk to the principal to understand what it is. But for my parents, that wasn't the case. I just told my dad that like, hey, I want to do this, and all he asked was, are you sure about it? Like that's all his question was. He wanted to make sure that if I'm getting into this, I'm getting into this, and I won't
Right.
like give up after 2 days and want to do something else. And that's all his question was. And after that, he never asked me about anything. Like he tried to make himself understand what game development is. He had friends who are software developers, so he talked to them to understand
So
what the field is
so is
exactly
your dad,
about.
is he also from a technical background or?
He's not. No, he has no technical background whatsoever. He's a sales manager in Jindal Steel, so
That's
no
amazing.
technical
Like that's
background
amazing that
whatsoever.
someone not from a technical background was so understanding of you. So I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that definitely did help because because he was so supportive, I was able to learn stuff from earlier age. Like even during, I would say in my 10th standard or 11th standard, I wanted a PC, and it had to be a high-end PC. So I had to explain him why I need a high-end PC. Graphics card were costly, so it took like he would pay for everything. He was like, "Oh, here's a PC." But graphics card in that PC was the one thing that took me a little bit of time to
To
convince him to
convince him.
explain. But yeah, because those were really costly at that point. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
I know.
that
Like, I
definitely did
remember I
help.
bought my first laptop, I think it was 2000, and it was like this old HP, which was like almost as thick as a brick, and it was 80,000 rupees. Like, it was 80,000 rupees 20 years ago. And for 80,000
Yeah,
rupees, you can buy a really nice laptop at this point, you know?
yeah,
So
obviously.
it was, and the value of money was really less. To invest in hardware at that time it was like you had to take out a bank loan. It was that bad,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, but yeah, so like he was convinced that this is gonna help me. Why he supported me in all of that. But yeah, I guess that was really good.
So at one point, I guess you decided to be a game developer. So tell us about the journey where you said, you know what, I think I want to make games, and then you started finding out about how to do it. Tell us about it.
How can I study game development? And at that point, not find any college that I was convinced is good enough in India. I was in 10th standard then, so Backstage Pass didn't exist then. I came across Digipen, which is something that would anyone looking for game development school would come across. Just do my computer science and then pursue further game development. So that was my initial plan. Backstage,
So like even before you came to Backstage Pass, you knew
yeah,
about
I knew
Digipen. Like
about
you said,
Digipen.
Digipen
Digipen was
Digipen
the
was
goal.
your,
Yeah.
so Digipen was your long term
Digipen
goal.
was
So Digipen was like your long term goal. You know, you found out about Backstage
yeah.
Pass, and then you came to Hyderabad, and then you joined up here.
Yep.
Okay. So then what was it like? Because, I didn't know that you had this long term plan of going to Digipen even before you came here. And that's really amazing. It kind of, did you think maybe I should like start making games on my own and then figure it out? Like, did that cross your mind, or you just knew that you needed some help?
No, that never crossed my mind. So I would say at that point in time in 2010, making games was not as easy as it is today. As an individual, like right now, you can go online, find engines, find tutorials, find art assets, and you can find everything to get started, which was not the case
Yeah.
back in 2010. So also I
Right.
needed help in programming. Like I knew I wanted to make games, but I also wanted to learn programming the best I could. I didn't want to like I understand self-studying can be done, but my aim was to understand the whole process of game development from professionals. Like that was my plan. So I never thought of making game on my own until later in my career. Like I definitely.
Right. Because to be honest, like at this point now, there are a lot of, like, if you go on Reddit, you'll find hundreds of threads where people are like, you don't need to game school. You can do this by yourself. You can sit at home on your computer and you can learn how to make games. And I beg to differ a little bit in the sense that I think that you can learn tools, like you can learn how to use Unity, you can learn how to create art, but putting a game together, creating a game is a lot more than creating some art, coming up with a game idea and implementing it in Unity. So which is why I say that going to a game school or getting a mentor, right? So like you mentioned that you had this tutor who used to come to your house, and he kind of put the seed of into your head, like, why don't you become a software developer because you're good at it. So tell us a little bit about how Backstage Pass and being in my class, and tell us a little bit about how that helped you.
So yeah, once I got into Backstage Pass, initially first year was basically very uh, the it was like any other college probably. You just learn the basics. You are learning physics, maths, English, uh, basics of C and C++, which I already knew at that point. So it was the first semester was kind of boring, honestly. Not gonna lie. Um,
Right.
Second semester was also just advanced stuff for the same level. Though I'm not gonna tell you this, that math and physics is very important, no matter how boring it feels. That's all you are gonna do ever in your game development job. So even though
Right.
it felt not so fun at that time, now that's all I deal with, so I feel like I should have paid more attention then. But yeah, so those after that, basically once your class started, the game design class, that was our first introduction to how actually convert all the code that we learned from like first 2 or 3 semesters. I think your class was
I
third
think third
semester.
semester.
Yeah. So basically,
Yeah.
like at that point, there was more, you learned all this, like, how to write code, but how to make games. That's where it came in. Like, you taught us level design. And even though you started with very basics, like not putting us in code, you started with board games and everything. That started.
Yeah, those board games used to be fun. When there used to be like when there were few people, we would just, let's just play board game. We used to get our Catan and we used to get our Carcassonne. That was a lot
Yeah,
of
and
fun.
those gave us ideas because we used to, like, all of us in the batch, we used to live together, right? So we after like playing those board games, we would also play those on our own time, and we tried to work on our own projects regardless of what was going on in the college. That's when I would say I got more into, other than college, I was more into self studying at that point. I taught myself Unity, even though it was not part of the curriculum. We did multiple game jams. So, having a group of people who are as motivated as you are, as passionate as you are, uh, for making games definitely helped. And then having you as a mentor definitely helped all of us because, we all actually, not all, but a lot of us were more into technical stuff. So we did not have that understanding of game design that we needed to convert our code into a game. So that definitely helped. And that's where it mostly all started. When we started making games, started doing game jams, we realized that, we can make games on our own. Even though I'm not, I would say this, even though we can make games on our own, there's a lot that you learn from college, which is so much more important that you would ever find online. Like, you cannot find
Yeah.
everything online.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing with online is that, there are a lot of people who have learned online and who have become successful game developers. But I would argue that their path would have been shorter and with less pain. And it, like I said, it's in school. What you get in game school is you get a peer group. You get people in the class who you can learn and bounce ideas off, and you get mentors. You get people who have worked in the game industry and who help you to not make mistakes you would do if you were doing. So I think that is having a mentor and going to a game college. That is the most important thing, because I mean, honestly, at this point, to learn Unity, there's
Yeah,
YouTube.
no, anyone can learn Unity in like 7 days.
In fact, you I remember at one point you had some Unity courses on
I did,
Udemy.
yeah. I actually did multiple. I made bunch of money as a student from that course. I
I
would
know, I
not
remember
recommend
that.
that course to anyone. So yeah, it was really bad. It was really really bad. But yeah,
No, but for the time, it was
for the
great.
time it was great because not only that I learned, I had to do more research to make those courses, right? Like if I'm actually making up an online video which people are paying for, I have to put
Right?
content which is worthy. So it actually helped me learn more than I would have if I did.
We, just tell everyone that we are going to have Anshul for a talk in IGDC 2020, which is upcoming. On He's going to be doing a talk on the 20th, and he's going to be actually talking about his journey in game development. So this is kind of like a trailer for that. This is the origin story, and that is the I like to say that is a superhero movie, and this is the origin story of Anshul. So Anshul, tell us a little bit about what you do. Like, what it's like to be you and working where you do. What's that like?
Well, overall, it's fun. Game development is always fun because you have to be passionate about it. If you're not, then it's just gonna burn you down. That's the truth of game industry. But if you're passionate about it, it's just always fun. You get to work with amazing like designers, artists, programmers, and I'm not gonna lie, game industry actually has best programmers of all the industry. Like we are working to make something which people are going to enjoy. We are not working for people to like, oh, how do we get more clicks? How do we get people addicted to this? We are working to make something that's going to give people a good experience for a while, right? We don't want them to stick to it for like 10 years, unlike other tech industries or like companies, so that's why it's most fun. Like you get to work on different stuff and it changes a lot, right? Like one game to another. Like one day you are working on a sports game, another day you are working on a first person shooter, then suddenly you are on an RPG. You get to work on different consoles. I worked on Oculus a lot, even though before I was like, oh, the VR, whatever. But after working on Oculus, I was like, this is amazing. I don't know from players' perspective, but as a developer, this is so much fun because it's challenging. The things you are doing when working on a device which is totally new to the market, you have so many different challenges, like how do you keep the player engaged, how do you make the movements better, some things which people probably worked on when consoles were new.
Mm-hmm.
They figured out what's a good control scheme which we are now using, so no one is trying to solve a problem of like, oh, which button should we use for jump.
Right, right.
But like if you're on a
Like
new
you're
device,
doing things, you're solving problems that have not been solved before.
exactly, yeah. That makes it a lot more fun. So that's why every time you come across a problem that has not been solved before, no matter how annoying it is, no matter how many days it takes, like especially with game industry, there are a lot of times when you would write code and you would throw it away, you would write code, you would throw it away. It would happen over and over. It's not a one time thing.
Yeah, and
And
also like not just the work, because I remember from my time in Vancouver when I was at Piranha Games, the studio atmosphere itself is, especially in the West, in the US, it's amazing. Like you have so much stuff. You have a pantry that's full of food that you can go and serve yourself. You can go and play video games. Your working times are flexible. It doesn't feel like work. You know,
yeah.
you go in Monday morning, and you want to go into work, and the place is amazing. It's beautifully designed. It's aesthetic. It's not got these cubicles where everyone is kind
No.
of stuck. Just the game studio space in West is just so energizing.
It is, yeah. It definitely is energizing. It definitely has everything you mentioned. Other than that, there are things like, after work, people are like, "Oh, let's hang back, let's play some games." So
Yeah,
you are
yeah.
doing that, and then other than that, it's things like, just your work being okay with, like, "Oh, you're playing games."
Yeah,
Like,
it's
yeah,
like,
that's part of my job,
honestly, the best
So
experience is for me when a team making games plays games together, and like
yeah.
it doesn't have to be the game you're working on. Like, for example,
Exactly. No,
when
no one
I was
wants to
at
play
Game
the game they
Loft.
are working on.
I know you do. Like at Game Loft, I used to be at Game Loft, and we used to play Left 4 Dead. Right, we used to play Left 4 Dead for 1 hour every day among us, and that was amazing. Like when you're playing games with your own team, that's bonding
Yeah.
of a different level.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We used to play, like, we still play. I would say it's not as much when you're working from home, because not everyone has same, setup at home. They are remoting into work and everything. But when we were at work, we also have game lounges. You have game lounges. We have a whole arcade. Like, we have arcade machines. So it's really so much fun to just go in, and even if you're not playing at times, you just stand there watching
Watching,
people
yeah,
play,
yeah.
hang around. Even that's fun. We have tournaments for Smash, Street Fighter, what else? Mortal Kombat. So it's just, we have leagues for them. So that's like, oh, we did this in college, but it's the same at work as well. So it's like, oh, I never left college.
I know, right? So your advice, because I meet a lot of people who say, you know what, I want to make the games that I play. And honestly, in India, it's mostly a mobile industry, 90%. But
True.
now
Yeah.
there are a few studios which have actually broken that barrier, and they're making console games. Like Raji recently reduced for the Xbox. That's
Yep.
really inspirational for us. So, what is your advice for people who want to reach that level? Like they want to make AAA games. They want to make console games. They want to be involved with that. Because I remember your first gig was at an intern with EA in Hyderabad, right? So, what
Yeah.
advice would you give to people who have that goal, that I want to make AAA games, I want to work for one of those big studios in India or abroad?
See, I can give advice as a programmer. I would say a path for a designer or an artist would be totally different.
Fair enough.
But as a programmer, something that people don't really concentrate on a lot is understanding the low level programming.
Right.
In any AAA game company, that's what they want from you. They don't want someone who can take Unity or Unreal, and that's definitely a good experience to have. Like, they want you to be able to do that, but that's not the only thing they want from you. Because, like, we talked about this like 10 minutes ago, that it's easy to go online and learn Unity and Unreal these days. But what's difficult is to be able to understand the low level stuff, like, how an engine actually works, how can you optimize a game.
Right.
The biggest thing in game industry is frames per second.
Right.
Every time you're working on physics or AI, you have limited number of frames you can do any calculation on. As an AI programmer, I remember, like, our team of, like, I just joined Sanzaru, where I was working on AI for Marvel Powers United VR, and the lead would always be like, why do we only get so less frames? We need more frames to be able to compute this stuff. But that's the truth of game industry. So even though it's easy, because if you're working on Unreal or Unity, those engines take care of the optimizations, but those are not the engines a AAA game studio is using. They have their in-house engines,
Right. They have their own
and they want
proprietary software.
yeah, exactly. So you could, and you are not always working on the gameplay, right? There are times if you're working on an in-house engine, you have to jump into the engine and be able to figure out those issues. So at that point, if you don't know that, you're not useful, right?
Right.
Like you have to be able to solve a problem
Right.
from, like, whichever problem arises. If it's to optimize the game, you have to optimize the game. If it's inside the engine, you have to do that. You have to, and there are times where you have to go down at the assembly level to understand what's going on. And I have interviewed for studios which actually do ask you some assembly level stuff
Wow.
in their
Okay.
interview.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I was like, who uses assembly? No one knows assembly. But their point was, we want you to be able to understand, because if you're working with us, you will have to deal with that someday. Like it probably maybe never, but you might have to. So we want you to know this stuff. So that's one of the most important thing as a programmer in game development. You want to know the low level programming, and I cannot stress it enough that you need to understand how a game engine works. If you can program a game engine from scratch, that's the best thing on your resume, because at that point you have understood what happens with the game. Because if you are programming a game engine, you are writing physics, AI, sound, uh, low level file management, and everything that a programmer needs to understand in a AAA studio. So yeah, those
Right.
are
So
some things which are important.
that's absolutely fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic to get that from you, Anshul. The next thing I want to ask is, from a career perspective, right? You've taken a while to reach where you are, and you know, I, you were in my class. It was almost like 10 years, 8 years, 10 years ago.
Yeah, ATS.
So from a career perspective, what would you tell them about how to kind of plan out, how, to do this? There needs to be some long term planning. There needs to be patience.
You definitely, yeah, a lot of patience. Basically, I guess that you need to figure out. So, first step would be to figure out what part of game industry you want to be in. I just talked about art, design, and programming, but there's so much more to game industry nowadays than just those. Like, you could be a sound designer, you could be just working on UI. Like, there are programmers and researchers just for UI.
Right.
So yeah, so basically at this point, it's very important to pick that one thing, especially if you are aiming for AAA, because a small studio will have one person do a lot of stuff, but AAA, they have specialized people for everything.
Right.
So if you are aiming for AAA, you have to find that one thing that you want to do long term in game development.
And go deep into it,
Find,
like, and
yeah,
become
find that
really.
and go, yeah, exactly. Go deep into it, read about it. There's so many books online.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Because
uh,
yeah, because
get on Quora. Like,
I find that generally in a AAA setup, they're very specialized roles. In a small indie setup, you might have to do, write a little bit of code, work a little bit on UI, help out with the design document,
yes,
and then, work a little bit on the marketing because there are very few people. But as the setup
true.
becomes bigger and bigger, your area of specialization becomes narrow and narrow, and you have to be able to go really deep into that. So specialization, like if you want to go AAA, so is that you're saying that specialization, you got to learn to go specialize in something and go deeper into it.
True. And marketing, you just mentioned, that's another thing. You could do marketing in game industry. So it's like you just need to find out that one thing. I can't, like, I don't have things on top of my head, but if you go and look up at jobs in any of a AAA studio, like Ubisoft, EA, or Sony, you would find so many of those that you would be like, oh wait, I could do this, and you would be shocked. You would be like, this makes no sense. Why would anyone want to hire a single person to do this? But they do, because they are specialized.
Yeah,
They are
if you
not
look at the
just,
game, if you look at the title, if credits of a AAA game, it's like a movie. It's crazy. You like.
yeah, it's like at least 2,000 to 2,000 people nowadays. Yeah, and so it's Exactly. So if you just go through those titles, you will see how many different departments are there. You just need to specialize in one of them and be good with it. That's in AAA industry. It's true. Like they are not really gonna care about your degree. If you have one, it's a plus point because it shows that you can take something and do it from start to finish.
Right, right.
A degree shows that, but basically if you are a good programmer and you have right stuff on your resume, you can get in AAA. But yeah, it's just about doing the right things and being specialization, and learning the low level stuff. Those are important things.
Fantastic, Anshul. So just one last question to wind things up. Looking back, it's been a long journey, maybe 10 years or so. Do you have any would you do anything differently? Like, are there any lessons that you have learned in your journey that you're like, if I had to do it all over again, I would do this thing differently, and maybe some mistakes you made along the way, or something that you would improve?
Exactly what I just was talking about, more low level stuff. I would
Right.
have concentrated more on low level programming than higher level programming. As a programmer in game industry, low level programming is very important. Like, yeah, if I was to do this all over again, that's what I would concentrate on more.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's a very valuable insight. Thank you so much, Anshul. So yeah, and everybody be aware that Anshul is going to be um, talking at IGDC, and he's going to be talking about more deep level stuff about how he managed to join game companies. This was kind of like more about what he's doing right now and kind of about his path of getting into game development. So make sure that you tune in, buy your tickets right now for IGDC 2020, and make sure that you are there for his talk, which is, I think, going to be on the 20th of November. So thank you so much, Anshul. That was amazing. And I hope I get to see you again on this
Yeah,
podcast. You know
definitely.
what I mean?
Thanks a lot for having me. I
Yeah,
had so
it's
much
it's
fun talking
amazing.
about all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's we there was so much going on in college and projects, etc. It's really good to catch up with you, and hopefully, I'll get to invite you back on this podcast from time to time to talk about your work. And thank you so much for coming on. What time is it there?
It's what, 11 p.m.
Yeah, it's 11 p.m. And I think you have the day off tomorrow. So
Yeah, I have the day off tomorrow, so
yeah, so
I'm good.
enjoy.
I mean, I don't sleep that early anyway, so
Fair enough. Thank you so
yeah,
much for joining us, and see you soon in a few days, and see you around. Thank you.
sure. Oh, thanks a lot for having me.